As we gather this morning to think about the native peoples of North America, we begin, as we did also on our homecoming Sunday, with a few inadequate words of acknowledgement regarding the land here at 380 Nichols Road in East Setauket on Long Island in the state of New York. The Congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Stony Brook honors the indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral land included the acres we claim as our own today. We recognize the Setauket people from whom this territory was stolen incrementally through grossly inequitable, opaque, and duplicitous exchanges between 1655 and 1662. Their descendants live on today as the Setauket Nation, among them our nearby neighbors residing in Setauket's Bethel Christian Avenue Laurel Hill Historic District. We acknowledge these ancestors and survivors and realize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. We honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants who carry on tribal traditions for present and future generations.
Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Stony Brook's service for October 10th, 2021. We're conducting this service in person in our sanctuary and also live streaming via YouTube. My name is Joan Rubinstein, and I am honored to be serving as the worship associate today, along with our minister, Margie Allen. Deb Little is our Director of Religious Education, and you can speak to her for more information about in-person children's religious education program. For those of you in the sanctuary, please remember to silence your phones. To any newcomers here today, we are glad you found us. Please come back for several services to get a true understanding of who we are as a group of faith, community of faith. You can also get more information and/or sign up for our mailing list on our website, UUFSB.org. If you can, please stay with us following the service for our social time in the parking lot for those of you here in the building, and virtually for those of you on YouTube. Remember, you have to leave the big group when you're ready to sign in for small group chats. In the chats, you can talk. You can meet with just a few people and talk about the service, talk about what UUFSB is, talk about any topic you can think of. You can find the link for the chats on our website, UUFSB.org, or in the special news feed that was sent out yesterday. You can leave the groups anytime you wish, so don't be afraid to just go in and check it out if you have to leave soon. It's okay. Maureen has graciously accepted the invitation to light our chalice. I have these words from Ojibwe Nation. Light the sacred fire in honor of the sacred one who teaches love, compassion, and honor, that we may heal the earth and heal each other. Thank you, Maureen. Now I'm changing hats, so to speak, and will be talking to you as a member of the 8th Principal Task Force. My faith commits me to do social justice, anti-racism work. Some of you may be scrunching your facial muscles, thinking, I thought you was an atheist. May be true, but that doesn't preclude having faith. Reverend Margie has suggested that atheists can use this congregation as a whole as their higher power. That has worked for me at times, but more importantly, it has led me to the realization that my faith is in the progressive movement in which I was raised. This was primarily the struggle for civil rights, peace, and nuclear disarmament. There were many Unitarian Universalists in the struggle, as well as Quakers. I interacted with both of them in my teens. It's not too hard to swap centering being progressive and being UU. The 8th principle makes that even easier for me. Anti-racism becomes a principle that is core to the bones, and is expected to involve the whole congregation and to be permanent. We already do a lot of anti-racism work in the congregation, but this is the practice of one committee and some other individuals who can become more or less deeply involved any time. There is no accountability. There is no sign-on by the congregation for permanence. We attempt to involve the whole congregation, but usually it's the same dozen or two who respond. And that by itself does not lead to beloved community. Achieving beloved community is a lifelong struggle. As Ronnie Gilbert, formerly of the Weavers, sang, just as we have drawn our strength from those who now are gone, younger hands will take our work and carry on. That is my faith, that if I do my part while I'm living, we will get closer to beloved community. And then others will carry it on, and we'll see that arc bend towards justice. Whether in my generation or the next, I believe we will eventually achieve beloved community. And when that happens, we will have fulfilled all 7 or 8 of our principles. Thank you.
So nice, thank you. I remember when I first arrived on Long Island and was driving around in the morning or sitting on the front step at our house with my coffee. And I was amazed to see large groups of children with their parents waiting for the school bus. Kids playing together on the curb, parents chatting with one eye on the little ones, mom or dad helping their kids up the steps of the bus, waving goodbye as the windows of the bus passed by. That particular sound the school bus engine makes when it pulls away, and the smell of diesel fuel. Another day of school awaiting, another day of work, and later play and homework and dinner together. Now imagine a time when one morning after sunrise, after the morning meal, after the kernels of corn had been given to the four directions in thanks for another day, imagine a strange vehicle pulling up to the house and a strange man getting out of it and striding, all confidence in his dark suit, up the stairs to the front door. Imagine mother and grandmother in conversation with him, their voices rising, fear and anger thickening the air all through the house. Imagine the man patting the gun on his hip. Imagine him saying, "Now," or imagine the child's face, eyes wide and wet behind the car's closed window. Imagine her mom, his mother, her stricken face, her wailing, her arms reaching out. Imagine the dust rising from under the wheels and the distance growing between each anguished heart. And here a childless mother, and here a motherless child. Today we push away the silence and the dust and that length of road, and we remember them. Generational heartbreak and loss. We remember the why and the who and the when. We remember the whole story, what we thought then, what we know now. In worship today, we summon the courage to remember, to let the feelings bloom, to look for the ways we ourselves may have played each character in that story, and to acknowledge the pain and the damage we've incurred and imposed. Maureen Shaiman sings with us, accompanied by Bethany Riddle on piano. Hum along with Maureen here in the sanctuary. Sing along out there in the live stream. Let your heart open gently to a difficult truth and the work of national healing that calls us.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
Our reading today is Reclaiming My Culture by Mike Adams. Mike is a Lilwat Indian from British Columbia, Canada, and currently resides in Los Alamos, New Mexico. He is a second-generation UU and an active member of the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. And here's his piece. The residential school survivors gathered in the community center recited, Holy Mary, Mother of God, blessed art thou. I glanced at the box with Mom's ashes, expecting it to topple. I thought she'd flip over in her grave over Catholic prayers at her memorial. Mom abandoned this forced religion, but not all natives do. Afterward, we sang Lilwat prayers, and then the family members spoke. The room was burdened with the vanished opportunities and stolen family ties. 8 of us had traveled 2,000 miles so Valerie could rest with her ancestors. 6 decades earlier, she had been violently separated from her family and her tribe as part of the Indian adoption program. Today she returned home, a beloved stranger. This exposed a heartbreak that had festered for a lifetime. Her eldest sister sobbed, recalling summers spent with her dad searching the U.S. for her stolen sister. My mom, my sister, and I had reunited with Lilwat family 20 years earlier. My wife and I agreed on a Lilwat native name for my son, and we've all formed relationships with Lilwat's aunts, uncles, cousins. We've also built lives in New Mexico, so we live far away from British Columbia and probably will never live with my tribe. But today I am learning Lilwat songs, and I am starting to learn our language along with my son. I hope that he might one day attend a university near Lilwat Nation and work on language preservation efforts. I hope that I can visit my people often and visit my mom's burial site. It's painful knowing that she rests so far away. I cried when we crossed the Canadian border. I was leaving my mom in another world, located far from mine. It was the right thing to do, and it brought some closure for a community traumatized by the theft of its children a lifetime earlier. This experience is bittersweet. I grew up isolated with white America. The only Lilwat Indians I knew were my mom and sister. I've gained family who look like me, and I'm reclaiming my culture. It's painful knowing my mom rests in such a distant place, but it also ties me to my people, my past. It is good.
We'll take a little time now for reflection, meditation, personal prayer. I'll share some thoughts, just a few that you can ponder, and then we'll lean back together again into the arms of a lovely shared silence. And after a while, Maureen and Bethany will invite us back from silence into song with hymn number 90, From All the Fret and Fever of the Day. So that was kind of a rough landing into the service. I mean, it was for me. I don't know if it was for you. Hard stories. So my suggestion for you is to rest with those stories in the silence that's coming, to let them settle in you as a kind of truth that you may have been well aware of or may not have known. Some people may have found those stories very difficult because of experiences in your own lives. I don't want you to go where you really can't go. Keep those doors closed if you need to. But think, if you are able, at least, about that bond between parents and children, that thing that binds us no matter what, and the ways that a cruel world can break it. Listen for the wisdom you seek today as the silence takes us into her embrace. Come back again when you hear the piano calling.
It is our spiritual practice to take a collection, which we share with a local nonprofit organization working for social justice. This month's recipient is Sepa Mujer. Please see the slides if you're online, or the chat, or if you're online, or our UUFS, or our website, UUFSB.org, to learn how to prepare your other than cash donations. We will have baskets going around in house, and cash will be split 50-50. SEPA Mujer stands for the well-being and success of Latina immigrant women on Long Island. Since 1993, SEPA Mujer has been bringing together community members and advocates to speak out against injustice, provide access to services and opportunities, take a stand against domestic violence, and push for social change. Through their work, they strive to nurture and improve civic engagement by way of raising and uniting their voices and developing leadership skills. SEPA Mujer aims to highlight the value of Latina immigrant women in our communities and to develop and celebrate their role on Long Island. Will the collectors please come forward? Please give as generously as you are able when you click on the link or when the basket comes around. And thank you.
We have been weighed down by sadness like a stone. We have yearned, we have sometimes felt so utterly alone. While we turn, and we've been stricken by the wonder of it all, stricken dumb. We have sometimes felt so faint we want to fall, overcome, but in all, I'd say this year in flight together has been let's say we make one more circle round the sun. We have raised our fists in anger and we try to work it out, that we need each other, we cannot deny. There is no doubt, there's no doubt. So let us weave another dream in outer space while we're turning on this planet home that holds our human race. We're still learning, but all in all, I'd say this year in flight together has been one. Let's say we make one more circle round the sun. I say this year in flight together has been a good, good one. What say we make one more circle? One more circle. Let's say we make one more circle round the sun.
Song by Peter Mayer, who sang here once. This past Thursday afternoon, I had a luxuriously long Zoom chat with a young person who was super, super excited to have found us. I mean, pretty much bowled over excited. She had one of those homecoming experiences that many of us have had. Even some of you, and certainly I, have had that feeling. She was just gobsmacked by the resonance of the place and the people, the service. She named some of the signs and surprises. A woman in the pulpit, a lesbian woman to boot, our love is love sign, all the things, earth, gender, love, belonging, the explicit welcome to groups of people and ideas that other houses of worship prefer to keep at arm's length. The land acknowledgement that day offered at that first service that she attended, the eighth principle. Never once in her memory had a conversation occurred in her family or at her church about anything to do with people of color or racism. And that her first service was actually called Homecoming, and that it felt like one for her, and that each time she's come, she has to wipe away tears. She can hardly believe that she might be welcomed as her whole self in this faith. She can't wait to be a part of things here. She's not here today, but I promise I'll tell her I talked about her. And she's right. No, I think we are a marvelous piece of work. We have become so over the centuries, and yet continue to become so aware of wrongs going on in the world around us, and that we so fervently believe that we're called to help make right, so determined to open our hearts and sanctuaries to humanity and all our diversity. It's easy to think that we are now and have forever been on the cutting edge, doing the next right thing, out there all by ourselves, fighting for the rights, freedom, and acceptance of those many who are despised and excluded and oppressed. Yes, but we are and always have been Unitarians and Universalists and Unitarian Universalists as a people, suffused with the ambient enthusiasms and prejudices of the American culture of our time. We are not immune to the influence of fear or suspicion regarding people who are different. We are not immune to assumptions about others based on class or race. We are not immune to paternalism and judgment and prejudice and belief in the exceptionalism of our own tried and true ways and unwavering expectations of one another. And worse, we come down with that particular flu often, and often suffer from it without even knowing how sick we are with it. Here's a teeny tiny example, truly small. When I first came to UUFSB in 2010, an elder in the congregation took me aside to give me a little advice. She said, "Who are you?" And she asked me to make a list of 10 or 15 identities that have come together to produce a me. And then she made me cross out one that was not as important as the others. And then another and another until I was down to about 5 or so. And then she said, pointing to whichever number it was that was lesbian on my list, "You'll have a better experience, and we will be better served if you minister less out of this part of your identity than the others you have ended up with here. Lead with them." There was at least one part of myself, she thought, that I had better leave out of the picture most of the time. And here I come to the story from late 19th century Unitarianism about our place in dealing with what was then called the Indian problem. After the Civil War, the push westward of our settler population escalated the tension in our relationships with the Native American populations whose reservation lands or open territories we were snapping up right and left for farming and ranching and mining as if they were already ours by manifest destiny. Around 1870, President Grant proposed a new policy to guide our relationships with Indian tribes. He invited religious organizations to manage the Indian agencies located on reservations throughout the country. He believed that clergymen, and they were men, would be less vulnerable to corruption, which was a problem in the agencies, and that the process of Christian conversion would be a strong foundation for the assimilation process. Assimilation was the goal, making responsible American men and women of these wild heathen savages. Assimilation, someone said, I forget, was going to be cheaper and easier in the long run than annihilation, cheaper and easier than total genocide. In 1874, 4 Unitarian ministers, including Henry F. Bond, were assigned 2 Ute agencies in Colorado. Bond had established a Unitarian congregation in Omaha in 1869, so he was veteran of the West. He accepted the management of the southernmost agency in Los Pintos and was in that position for 2 years. Their charge was, quote, to meet the Indians in a humane Christian spirit, saving them from trickery, robbery, intemperance, and other vices of frontier life, and to present to them the better phases of a Christian civilization. A succession of agents failed in their mission to the Ute tribe, which was resistant to the well-intentioned but unwelcome, uninformed, and as we understand it now, culturally imperialistic and white supremacist approach of those nice Unitarian clergymen. At the 2009 General Assembly of our Association of Congregations, President Bill Singford made an official statement of apology in the presence of UU delegates and Ute tribal leaders during the opening worship. He said, "We ask for your forgiveness, and we promise to stand with you as you chart your way forward." The apology was accepted with good humor and some stories. At that time, most of us in that room were not aware of, and very little information had so far surfaced about a boarding school that Henry Bond and his wife Pamela went on to establish on the Crow Reservation in southern Montana near Billings. We had promised us UUs, as an association in 2007 to, quote, uncover our links and complicity with the genocide of Native peoples, with slavery and the slave-based economy, and with all types of racial, ethnic, and cultural oppression, past and present, toward the goal of accountability through acknowledgement, apology, repair, and reconciliation. So after 2007, we started digging, and after 2009, we continued. It turns out in early 1886, the board of the American Unitarian Association, which is our pre-merger designation, assembled the Unitarian Committee on Southern and Indian Education and Work. The AUA board was aware that other religious bodies were more engaged in work with Indian tribes than the Unitarians, and this bothered them, since we had been long well known for our social justice work, and the the Indian problem was at that time a popular cause. Here's how board member Samuel Atkins Elliott, who would begin a 27-year run as AUA president in 1900, framed the project. We do not expect now from the Indian any contribution to national thought or character. Indian education simply aims at making self-respecting, self-reliable, self-supporting men. It is not a question of mental development. It is a question of preparing a savage for the rights, responsibilities, and burdens of citizenship. The education of the women, whose degraded position among Indians is an insurmountable barrier for the elevating of the race, is thus quite as essential as that of the men. Indians must be taught to live properly before they can be taught to think and act with judgment and independence. So Henry Bond and Pamela were charged with starting a school which would be supported by the fundraising efforts of that Committee on Southern and Indian Education and Work. The couple chose a beautiful setting with a good water source on reservation land near the Custer Railroad Station, and they quickly erected a 2-story U-shaped building with dormitories upstairs and classrooms downstairs. They called the place the Montana Industrial School for Indians at Ramona Ranch. There's a story behind the Ramona, which I didn't have time to tell you. Boys and girls occupied separate wings of the building. Other learning spaces besides the traditional classrooms were blacksmith and carpentry shops, a large garden, an industrial kitchen, and a dining room for 50. In addition to basic studies for children 6 to 18, the boys would learn farming, slaughtering, ranching, and work in the metal and wood shops, and the girls would learn cooking and housekeeping and gardening. Bond said of the assembled body of students, "They are all promising. How such good-appearing fellows came from an ignorant, lazy, squalid, orphaned race is a constant surprise to us." Letters and other accounts suggest that despite such assessments of the race, the Bonds set up a way of life that was closer to the goal of humane than many residential schools for Native peoples in the US and Canada. Parents, though initially reluctant, did bring their children to the school and usually returned them when they ran away. The Crow were starving, and even though Bond for years refused to offer food supplies to the adults, parents knew their children would be better fed at the school than at home. Eventually, they learned and built a guest house and invited parents and others to come for regular visits and to Sunday morning services at which everyone was served a meal. There don't seem to have been any restrictions on the use of the Crow language, nor particularly harsh punishments, but Our digging so far has not turned up reports from the descendants of these children about what they've heard about the lived experience of the school. There were losses to infectious diseases, and as I mentioned, runaways. And in 1887, conflict erupted over the encroachment of white settlers on the Crow reservation land, which required total evacuation of the school property from time to time for the safety of the children. But the school's relationship with the tribe seemed fairly cordial. At the beginning of the 1894-95 school year, a father named Two Leggings gave a little speech upon relinquishing his son to the care of the bonds. He said, "This is my child. Now he is yours. Let your heart be good to him. I want him to learn and to be a good child. Be good father and mother to him. He is young and wants to eat often. Give him good bread and meat." So over time, finding adequate funding became increasingly challenging. The US government had been contributing $108 a student per year, but the rest of the total cost, $8,000 or $10,000, had to be raised by the committee back east in church-to-church collections and newsletter pitches. And then in 1895, the federal aid was disappearing, and the bonds chose to put the school under government control at that time. And then after a little bit, all the students were transferred to the agency school, and that episode in our history ended. The last we hear about the school in sources so far unearthed was that a centennial celebration was organized for October 4th, 1986, on the Crow Reservation in Custer, Montana. And then UUA President William F. Schultz attended and spoke. Friends, we never asked the Crow people or any Native nations whose children were forced to attend residential boarding schools what they needed from white Americans. When they told us what they did need, like food to keep their families from starving and help protecting the little land that remained to them, for instance, we declined the ask, concentrating all our effort on what we now know they did not need. They did not need, over the course of 100 years of forced separation of children from their families, to lose the ability to speak their own mother tongues. And I'm talking of the larger world of boarding schools. They did not need to dress and style their hair like white Americans. They did not need to turn away from their traditional dance and music, spirituality and rituals. They did not need to abandon their native cuisine in order to learn new cooking skills. Farming and smithing and woodworking and service jobs should never have been their only options for careers in America. They did not need alcohol for damn sure, or guns. They did not need to leave who they were in their wholeness behind in a process of so-called assimilation into white American culture. Assimilation is the compromise a white supremacy culture makes with people who do not qualify for the status white, until they do maybe one day. To assimilate is to accept the standards, behaviors, language, appearance, characters, secrets, and loyalties of white Americans. Nobody needs that. Even people raised white, honestly, don't need that. What we all need is to be seen, to be appreciated, to belong, to be able to express who we are and what we love freely, to give our gifts and receive gifts from others, and to live in a peaceful and sustainable way on a planet which also does not need to be assimilated. And to answer a couple of comments that I heard after the 8th principle service, it really doesn't matter at this juncture in our maturation as Unitarian Universalists if the proposed 8th principle is expressed right now in the exact right words or is going into the exact right place in our association's bylaws or elsewhere. What is important is that we position ourselves to learn deliberately and steadily how to be in relationship, in right relationship with everyone, not me. And from that position of right relationship, to learn how to build a better world together. Now, our closing hymn is one we've rarely sung. It may be a little difficult to hum, I don't know. It's One World, number 133. We here will sing, we here will hum, and you there will sing. For all its sorrow, one world shaping one tomorrow, one humanity, though riven, we, to whom a world is given. Try to sing or hum, and if all else fails, read out loud the words as Maureen sings so they can move through you and work their little bit of magic. Looks like we're going to run just a little bit longer than normal today. I'm still trying to learn how this works again after over a year of virtual. Our closing words are a slightly condensed version of remarks by UUA co-moderator, the Reverend Meg Riley, during the General Session 3 of last June's General Assembly of our Association of Congregations. Some of us attended virtually. This was an interruption in our regular work. The urgency of our work together to dismantle white supremacy culture became starkly evident once again this week when the Cowessess First Nation confirmed the existence of unmarked graves of 751 children and adults at the Marieville Residential School in Saskatchewan, which was run by the Roman Catholic Church until the 1970s. 751 people in unmarked graves. We hold all of the Indigenous people here at General Assembly and in our communities in our hearts at this time, as you grieve and seek healing. And we hold all of the Canadian people here at General Assembly in our hearts as you grieve and take steps towards reparations. Those of us in the United States certainly have no reason to feel distance from those buried bodies. Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland announced a federal Indian boarding school initiative earlier this week, which will include using similar technology to find unmarked graves near U.S. boarding schools. Nor can we feel smugly distanced as Unitarian Universalists. Unitarian Minister Henry Bond opened the Bond Mission School on the Crow Reservation in Montana in 1886 and closed it 11 years later, not because of moral objections, but due to lack of funding. White supremacy culture is a culture of death. It takes courage for those of us who are white to face history and realize how that murderous culture is still alive, and we need each other to find that courage. For Indigenous people, Black people, people of color, it takes profound courage and vital embodied community to survive and to thrive. This is why the work we are doing now as UUs is so urgent and also so difficult, and why our movement is so indebted to and grateful for DRUM, Diverse Revolutionary UU Multicultural Ministries, and Black Lives of UU, or BLUE, and the Indigenous Caucus. Usually in benediction, I just give a few words, but I wanted to not leave you in a place with no comfort. So I want to offer this poem by Rosemary Watola Tromer. It's called From the Inside. In these days, when the torrents of grief flood deep, when sorrow pools like blood on the floor, in these days when I can do nothing but meet this moment, when I am too spent to say hello, love comes to meet me where I am. It holds me while I cry. It cradles me where I sit. It steps with me as I walk. There was at first a moment when I tried to push it away, alarmed by this onslaught of love. Too much, I protested, arms up in resistance, but love obliterated my no. It moved in to hold me from the inside, slipped into my tissue, my bones. It infused itself into each tiny cell, each organelle, and made inside me a home. Since that moment, I am never alone. Now it is love that moves my hand, love that shapes each word, love that helps me rise, love that pours the tea, love that wakes with me in the middle of the night, automatic love that makes the heart beat, automatic love that makes the lungs breathe, automatic love that meets the impossible grief and surrounds it with an impossible grace. Love that grips me around my heart as if to save me from drowning. Love that murmurs again and again, I've got you, sweetheart. I've got you. Amen. The end of my benediction these days is you have to leave the room without talking to each other. So it goes against our principles. Have a great day.